My name is Brandy Rollins. I am an assistant research professor at Penn State at the Center for Childhood Obesity Research Center. My work focuses on looking at how parents manage children's intake of palatable snack foods, how they use control inside of the home, as well as how children may differentially respond to those different kinds of practices. Some children may be respond more negatively to control than others, and so looking at those individual differences. Restriction overall, parents tend to restrict to manage children's access to palatable snack foods, things, sweet foods, salty chips, things like that. And it may work while the child's actually inside of the home and the restriction is actually taking place. But where restriction fails is that whenever the children get access to the food outside of the home or even inside of the home, children tend to overconsume those foods, so they show poor self-regulation when it comes to foods that are restricted. And so in that sense, restriction actually isn't working. And restriction, what it also does is that in the long term, because when parents restrict, it's not just once or twice, it's over a long period of time. What it may hinder is actually the development of self-regulation in children's intake of those restricted foods. So those foods that are higher, in added sugars, higher in added solid fats. That children, they're not learning to self-regulate their own intake of these foods. So as they get older and they gain access, they become adolescents, they don't show, they're eating more for pleasure, they show more dysregulated eating of these foods. And so that's why restriction doesn't work, and that it doesn't promote self-regulation self-regulated intake of those foods. Well, that's what the field is going next in terms of, okay, well, we know we have we have a lot of studies showing restriction doesn't work, okay, and here are the reasons why it doesn't work. And so where we're at now in the field is that we're saying, okay, well, let's actually look at restriction, because how we've been looking at it, it's way too big. Everything that parents do to manage children's intake, that in terms of any kind of limit, has fallen under the realm of restriction. And what we're arguing now is, no, that's not the case. Restriction is those coercive practices. Okay, it's where you're enforcing compliance, you're taking food away. Rather, practices that may be more beneficial, and we're in the process of testing this out, maybe those more structure-based feeding practices, okay? And when I say structure-based feeding practices, what that means is that you're structuring the home environment so that you're providing some level of access, but there's routines and there's rules around when access is given. So it's not a black or white thing. You're doing shared decision making in terms of when and how much is given to the child, and the child's participating in it. It's not just the parent's perspective. And so based off the parenting literature, which has looked at structure-based parenting for much longer than we've looked at it in the feeding literature, it suggests that this may be an alternative approach that we can apply to the feeding literature. And there is some evidence to suggest that it may work. However, the body of literature is very small in the body of evidence is very small in the feeding literature, and that's what we're learning now, okay? What does structure look like in terms of feeding practices, and what are the effects of these feeding practices on children's intake? So I guess the answer to the question is we're heading in a direction where restriction doesn't work, structure, where parents are creating those rules and routines and setting limits, being consistent, but also considering the child's perspective. That may work, but it's kind of a stay tuned to see in terms of the evidence showing that this, yes, is a viable strategy. This, yes, is how you tell parents how to do these things.